I'm curious if One Championship is testing their fighters. I'm curious if they're still sticking to the hydration test. And I'm curious on whether their website is telling the truth. And the only reason I'm asking that question is because RDR was on DJ's Mighty Cast, which is Demetrius Johnson's podcast, and he brings on different guests or whatever. These clips are pretty damning. It pretty much claimed that RDR never got tested at One Championship while he was there. And then DJ, he didn't claim outright, but he did say that some of his fights he never got tested over a One Championship. And I'm only asking that question because of these clips. So go ahead and take a listen for yourself.
But in one, they do all these tricks, and they kind of act like we're going to do something that's fair. They kind of act like we're going to do something that there's drug testing and all this stuff. But yeah.
The tricks he's talking about are, let's say you're like a quote weight bully, or how Islam can make 55, or, you know, how Volk has to prepare for 40, 45, or anyone that has to make a weight cut, you have to come down. How he was claiming he was walking around 215 to 185, 30-pound difference roughly. Yeah, 30-pound difference. And so you have to prepare yourself to actually get to that. So those are the tricks he's talking about in terms of how in the UFC, before weight cutting, you might see a middleweight at like 225, 205, whatever the case is. They're obviously not walking around at 185. So those are the tricks he's talking about. And then he talks about the weight cutting and then the drug testing as in One Championship. And then listen to this part. This is where, in my opinion, which is just a little bit longer after that clip, he goes in a lot more in depth on the testing and everything, and so does DJ. So here's that.
There's times when I fought in the UFC and I would fight, I never got drug tested. I'm like, oh, I didn't get drug tested this time. There's times I fought in One Championship, I never got drug tested. But when I was in the USADA testing pool,
honestly, you could see as soon as he brought up the drug testing and not getting drug tested, RDR's face kind of fucking lit up. And I'm not saying it because I wasn't there. Obviously, I'm not the fighter. I've never worked for either of these organizations or fought. But RDR, as soon as he won against Gerald, and that was his first fight in the UFC, obviously in the post-fight presser, he had some things to say about One Championship. So it's not like he left on the best of terms, maybe, right? He might have some animosity towards the promotion because of not being able to have some consistency, or these claims to having a fair fight, right? And then you kind of pull these little tricks and all this bullshit. So we'll see. Let's continue.
It was probably the best, most efficient testing I've ever had in my whole entire career.
Yeah, so I missed that part. I didn't compete in UFC during USADA, but yeah. What they're doing now, it's at least it's good. At least there is drug testing. Like in one, there's no. I've never been tested.
Did you hear that?
What they're doing now, it's at least it's good. At least there is drug testing. Like in one, there's no. I've never been tested.
That's what I'm talking about. They've both claimed it, so it leaves me to have that question on: are they actually testing their fighters, like the big name fighters? Are they just doing it very selectively as randomized? Are they even testing at all? How would you know if you were, let's just use the UFC for an example, in the amount of number of athletes that they have? Unless they're all talking together, which is very unlikely, how do you know that XYZ fighter got tested in such and such country and you didn't, and they did, and you did, and they didn't, and all of that information? You're not going to know, especially if it's held from the fighters and it's randomized and all of these different things. So it's very damning when they go on these different podcasts and then they give out this, little tidbits and talk about it not ever being tested. It's pretty alarming, to be honest with you, especially for someone like One Championship who talks about being a clean promotion and testing their athletes and making sure it's a safe. It's like, come on, like he said earlier in the first clip, saying it's going to be a fair fight and it's really not. And it's just all this like smoke and mirrors kind of. So let's continue because he does say some more.
Not even before fights or whatever.
Mhm.
So, but they said they were going to drug test in the beginning and everything, and I think that kind of got away from them. And the same thing happened with the making weight with the hydration test. They started with it and they did. I think in the beginning everybody kind of adhered to it, but then people figured out how to cheat it, and then it was kind of like, yeah, doesn't
Gotcha.
really that system doesn't really work either.
Again, if you're not going to go watch it, I do encourage you to go watch the full interview. It is a pretty good, I think, hour and a half. It is a good listen. At the end of the day, it leaves me questioning whether they do test their athletes. And I don't really care whether they do or not, but don't lie about it. Like if you're going to say you do and you really don't, that to me is the problem. If you don't, just say you don't. If you do, try to fucking actually do that. Like, don't just say you do it, because on their website here, it makes no fucking sense to me. All right. It says here, maybe I can get out of the way a little bit so you can see it on the camera. But the one anti-doping policy is a central part of the organization's effort to protect the health and safety of its athletes and to protect the right to compete on a level playing field. Right? So starting in August 2022, International Doping Tests and Management, IDTM, the global leader in the anti-doping industry with merger partner Drug Free Sport International, DFSI, became the exclusive entity to independently collect biological samples from athletes at one championship event. Well, we just heard two different X1 championship athletes. I mean, at least RDR claimed to not have ever been tested. And DJ only claimed on some events. He wasn't as definitive as RDR, so I will give him that. But it doesn't look good, okay? That's not me. That doesn't look good. That's from your athletes. And that's from your own fucking website here. So, and that's your martial arts section of it. I mean, there's DJ right there with your shiny bald head. We love it. Regardless, if you're going to do it, do it. Don't lie about it.